Back here in the United States, as we reported on Friday, a Catholic high school is the first religious school in Maine to receive state tuition funds. Cheverus High School in Portland was the only religious school to apply for the state's tuition reimbursement program. The move comes after a Supreme Court ruling in June. It is likely that more religious schools will apply for the funding next year. And we go now to Angela Morabito, spokesperson for Defense of Freedom Institute and the former press secretary for the U.S. Department of Education. Angela, so good to be with you today. Quickly refresh our memories about the Supreme Court case and how big of a victory that ruling was for religious schools and school choice in Maine.
This was a huge victory in a case called Espinoza v. Montana. And in that case, the Supreme Court struck down Blaine amendments, which was a product of anti-Catholic bigotry, I believe more than 100 years old. These amendments in state legislatures and in state statutes that said funding for school choice programs could not be used at religious schools. This was designed from the start to shut out Catholic schools, and finally, those amendments have been struck down. So what Maine is doing is finally taking advantage of that new freedom, putting it to good use, and allowing a parochial school to receive those taxpayer dollars and go to work for students.
And Angela, for those who don't know, how exactly does the tuition reimbursement program work? And also, how will now more students and families benefit from it?
So the programs work a little bit differently in every state, but what they all have in common is that the student wears their funding like a backpack. So the funding that is set aside to educate that child travels with them to the school of their choice. It just doesn't go to the school that they're assigned to by the government. It goes to where that child wants to be. And in some reimbursement programs, like what you described, the family does have to fund the money initially, but they get a rebate, they get a refund from the government because those tax dollars that have been assigned to their child are actually being put to work for that child's education.
And overall, talk to us about how this particular Supreme Court ruling for schools in Maine impacts school choice in other states.
Well, the Supreme Court ruling affects schools nationwide, so Maine is just the one that happens to be taking advantage of it today. We're going to see this happen all across the country. And what we know for certain is that whenever school choice programs open up, parental demand just goes through the roof. I could find no record of any school choice program that landed with a thud. Anytime the opportunity is there, we see huge demand for it. We've seen it recently in Arizona and New Hampshire, even in Florida, where as soon as school choice opens up, there are thousands upon thousands of applications. So I expect that very same thing to happen in Maine. And the benefit to students is tremendous. Not only is this wonderful news for religious freedom, but even if you take religion out of it and look at this in purely economic terms, it actually costs less to educate one student for 1 year in a Catholic school than it does in a public school. And statistically, the test scores are better. So by allowing public funds to go to Catholic schools, we're actually getting more bang for our educational buck. It's being put to work to best serve the public interest.
Almost out of time, Angela, but I quickly want to talk about something else, switching gears here slightly. California, as you know, kept its schools closed for more than a year during the coronavirus pandemic. And now the state says that it's going to delay the release of test scores for students for several weeks and possibly until after the midterm elections in November. I want to get your thoughts on that and also what the reasoning is behind this.
Well, the reasoning is purely political. This is about trying to hide the abysmal results of extended school lockdowns. What we saw recently in the nation's report card data is that students who were trapped in government schools where unions kept them closed for a very long time, they suffered the most. There was real and substantial learning loss that demands a significant response from their district, even from their teachers. We've got to help these kids. So California is purely playing politics here. They know the scores are terrible. And by the way, the teachers unions did too. That's why we saw this past summer, both of the major teachers unions were voting on resolutions to try and get out of standardized testing. They know they can't defend their product, so they're trying to hide the results.
Angela, thank you so much for your time today. Great to have you on as always.
Thank you so much, Tracy.